Before we get started, here are the things you'll need. Ground beef or turkey, Italian beef or turkey sausages, tomato paste and tomato sauce, crushed or diced tomatoes, 12 lasagna noodles, basil, sugar, 2 eggs, ricotta, Parmesan, and mozzarella cheese. Let's get started. Now for my lasagna, I used ground beef and then I used turkey sausages. I like that combo the best. I'm almost positive. I never got her recipe when she's deceased now. My aunt used to make her lasagna. Oh my gosh, the best lasagna on the planet. And I never could understand how she got that taste until one day somebody who can't eat beef, they said, well, I would like some lasagna, so I used turkey. And I said, I can taste a hint of what she used in her lasagna. So I figured out it's beef and turkey. So I personally use ground beef and I use ground turkey. And you can use only one pound, but I use 1.5 pounds for both the turkey and the sausages because it comes out way better, and it's a better balance in my opinion with everything else that's added into the lasagna. So what I do is just buy the sausages, I cut off the little casings, and then I mash them up. Now you're going to get 2 pans or however you cook your ground beef and turkey, and you're going to make sure you use olive oil is preferable, but you can really use whatever oil you prefer. So then you'll get those nice and heated up in preparation for the beef and the turkey so that you can make both of them at the same time. Don't do 2 one at a time, it's going to take too long. So then you can just cook them how you normally would, saute them however you do them, make sure they're good and done. Now, while I make my turkey and ground beef, I make sure I keep dicing it as I go, keep slicing it. I use 2 forks, I don't use a knife. I just keep going and going and going to make sure that it's ground and that it's not just one big clump, and that makes sure that it also evenly cooks. It's not just one side has more and you didn't realize it, so that cooks more, or one side is tough. It evenly cooks, it gets it ground, and it's better in the lasagna that way. When it's done, it should be nice and golden. It shouldn't be any pink or any red visible. Nice and golden, nice and brown. And then after that, what you're going to do is strain the oil, because these will have a lot of oil. Even though I use 93% lean, and I think one was 97% lean, it's still going to have a lot of oil. So just take your strainer, pour each of the meats inside of the strainer, and then gently, once you do that alone, the oil is going to start coming out. But if you gently press with a big spoon, that will make sure you get all the excess out. But don't press it too hard, because you don't want the meat to dry out, even though that's going to be pretty hard with all the other sauces that are going to be added into the mix. But just lightly pat down on the meat, and that will get all of that oil to strain into the bowl that you should have underneath, so it doesn't go down your drain. Next, you're just going to take both meats and combine them. Make sure you mix them up all nice and good and get it incorporated evenly, so that you don't have one side of the lasagna that might taste like beef and the other that might taste like turkey or sausages, whatever you chose to use. If you are allergic to beef or have an allergy to beef or anything like that, turkey is a good alternative. Or if you don't like turkey, beef is a good alternative, or you can definitely mix them up. And even if you want to try it, you can also use pork. It does not have to be ground beef. You can make lasagna pretty much with any meat. It's just the standard is ground beef. And now this is where everything starts getting mixed in together. First, you're going to add crushed or diced tomatoes, 1 can. They're large cans. They always come in a can. 1 large one. I usually use crushed. I do use diced. Diced isn't bad. Diced, in my opinion, gives it more of a pasta taste. So if you want more of a pasta taste, go with diced tomatoes. If you want more of a subdued taste, go with crushed. That's why I go with crushed, because I'm not necessarily a fan of pasta, so I prefer to have less of a pasta taste. But if you want that straight out of Italy taste, make sure you use diced tomatoes. And up next, you're going to add in your tomato sauce. And a little empress note, since everything in the lasagna can have a lot of sodium, what I use, or what I try to use if I can, I either use no salt added on certain things, or I use very low sodium. But when I use all my sauces, my paste and all that, because then you can eat it and it won't necessarily be a problem. And people who, when I make it, and if they have high blood pressure and things like that, when they eat my lasagna, they say, well, I didn't have any issues after eating it. So that lets me know that there is a difference when you look for things that are low sodium or no salt added. And now we're going to add in the tomato paste. Another empress note that is that with basil and Italian seasoning and the other things that we're going to add in there, you can actually cut those out if you get sauces that already have it in there. A lot of times what I prefer to do is just get basil paste or basil sauce, whatever it is. I think I get basil paste or something like that, because then that way the basil's already in there and you don't have to add it. Because my sister, when she made lasagna once, she said, oh, I need basil. And I said, are you sure you need it? She said, I think I need it. I don't remember getting any. I said, are you positive? So she got the basil and she added it in. But then when she looked at all of her stuff, the paste, the sauce, the diced, everything had basil in it, and that lasagna was just basil with a little bit of meat. That's how I figured to describe it. But it tastes fine, but it was a very strong basil taste. So you don't have to add in basil, you don't have to add in Italian seasoning or anything like that. If you get the things, the sauces and the paste and all that, they already have it in there. And the basil, like I just said about the basil, is all optional. And another empress note, it's not even an empress note, while you're doing this, it's going to be on simmer. You're not going to have the stove off. They're all going to be, you put all your meats together, then turn the stove back on, turn the burner back on, and you're going to have this on simmer as you mix everything together. And make sure you mix it well. You can mix it after each item gets added, or you can mix it all together. I used to just add everything and then mix it, but I learned the paste, and not the paste, the sauce and the crushed tomatoes, every time after I add those, then I mix it, because it's a whole lot trying to mix it all at the end. you'll need a large bowl to add in all of your cheeses. Not all of them only are getting added at the same time, but you need a big bowl because the ricotta takes up a lot of space and you need to be able to mix it and whisk it all in there. But you just need 1 container, 32 ounce of ricotta. You need 1 cup of Parmesan cheese, and you need 2 large eggs. Make sure they're room temperature. Don't have them cold, although it won't necessarily do anything like it would if you were baking a cake, but it's better to have them at room temperature. And then make sure you mix them all in, mix it in well. Make sure it's just, you grind up the ricotta a little bit because it kind of comes out like gelatin a little bit, but just mix it all in, chop it and dice it a little bit with a whisk, and then keep whisking and whisking, and it'll mix in with a nice yellow color. It's not as orange in reality as it looks on here, but it mixes well. It should be a nice yellow color. So now you are going to be putting in your lasagna noodles. I know it's not even a necessary step, but I use the same frying pan that whatever one I'm not using, that I use to cook whatever it is that I cooked in the pan prior, because although it sounds silly, I like to keep that residue in there and then boil the water, because in my mind I feel like, and I know it does do it, but it's just not necessary, but I still do it. It adds to the flavor of the water, which adds to the flavor of the noodles. It's not necessary, and it's not necessary because you're putting the noodles in the lasagna anyway, so it's going to absolutely be saturated with all the good taste of the turkey and of the beef or whatever you use. So it's not necessary, but I do that. It's silly, but I'm going to keep doing it because I like it. And then as soon as they're done boiling for 8 minutes only, immediately take them out and cool them off with cold water. When you do this, it keeps them from sticking together. It keeps them from breaking apart. It kind of freeze chills them. So this way they will be whole and they won't have any cracks or tears, and it will be easier to put your lasagna together. Now, putting the lasagna together is one of the most fun parts, I think, of making the lasagna. It just makes you feel like you're really putting something together. Making lasagna really is, in my opinion, architecture, is because you're building something. It's a lot of steps. It's not hard to make lasagna at all. It's just a lot of steps. And I'm telling you, at most, it should only cost you around $50 to $55. Now, what you're going to do first is grab around a cup of meat sauce. You don't really need to measure it. When I put it together, I've made it so many times that I just eyeball it. I don't need to measure anymore. But you want to make sure you have a nice covering on the bottom layer, because that way it won't burn when you put it in the oven. It's kind of there just for that. That's why I don't put as much at the bottom layer as I do with the other layers, because that's to make sure that that's kind of oiling your pan. Really, you're taking your pan, which should be 9 by 13. I just get it. If it says lasagna pan, just grab that. But if you don't have any pans that say lasagna pan, or one at the house that you use all the time, a 9 by 13 pan is what you need to use. Is for the recommendation for lasagna. And then after you get the meat sauce layered on the bottom, you're going to add 4 noodles, and you're going to lay them, kind of stagger them on top of each other and spread them out completely over the meat sauce. And then after the noodles, we're going to add the ricotta mix. Now the ricotta mix can be a little difficult. I usually use a spoon. You can use a spatula, is it called a spatula? I haven't used one in so long. You know what you use to spread frosting on the cake, even though I use a spoon. You could use that. That'll probably make it easier. It's not hard to get it on there. My suggestion, if you do use a spoon, go 1 noodle at a time. Don't try to just spread it across. I always forget when I first start putting it on, but eventually I'll remember, oh wait, just do it one, like blob it down there and then spread it down 1 noodle at a time. And then after you get your ricotta mix, make sure you layer the noodles. And the reason that we actually boil the noodles first is because you want to make sure that they're cooked. I know there are other ways people do this. My sister, she does the sitting in the water, then draining and sitting in the water. With me, I just do to boil them for 8 minutes, because when they're boiled for 8 minutes, they don't cook completely. That way, when you put it in the oven, they don't overcook, because putting them in the oven is going to cook them as well. So if you fully cook the noodles and then you put them in the oven, you're fully cooking them twice, and you don't want them to dry out, you don't want them to overcook. So that's why you boil them for 8 minutes, then you put them in the oven, they'll turn out fine. And then after you do the ricotta mix, you just take your mozzarella. I usually get a 32-ounce bag. You can use a 16-ounce. I just personally use 32 because I like to make sure every spot is covered as much as possible. So after the ricotta mix, you take your mozzarella and you spread it on top evenly and make sure it gets every area. You don't have to overcoat it, but just make sure that it's a nice coating. And then once you do that, you repeat those steps 2 more times to get your complete 3 layers for your lasagna. Now you're going to have your oven heated at 375, and you're going to take your lasagna and you're going to layer it with foil. You just need 1 layer of foil. Cover the lasagna with foil, because what you're going to have to do next is bake the lasagna with the foil for 25 minutes. Now I admit, when I baked this lasagna specifically, I added more than I usually do. I did it by mistake. So I actually ended up baking my lasagna for 1 hour and 10 minutes. Do not bake your lasagna for 1 hour and 10 minutes. It's not necessarily, it wasn't burnt, it wasn't tough or anything like that. It's just, it could have ended up being overcooked. So put the foil on top, put it in the oven that should be preheated at 375, and bake it with the foil on top for 25 minutes. And then after you bake it with the foil for 25 minutes, take the foil off and then continue to bake it for another 25 minutes, or you can do 30 minutes, 30 minutes. You can bake it for 1 hour, because that's usually what I do, but 25 minutes and 25 minutes is just fine. Now, when you take your lasagna out of the oven, I say let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. It's not going to make it chill at all. Lasagna stays hot for a long time because there's so much in there. Why I let this sit is because you want to make sure it's not too hot, and you don't want to serve it. You can serve it like this right away, but I like to let it sit so that it can simmer down a little bit, and then when you cut it, there won't be any issues, because sometimes if you cut it right out of the oven, it will be way too hot and it will kind of start melting around your knife or whatever you use. I personally use a pizza cutter. Yes, I do, because I try to use knives and it's just so much easier to use a pizza cutter. So that's what I use, and it's kind of fitting, you know, keeping up with the theme, the Italian theme. So then you let it sit, you cut it up, you serve it, and you enjoy it. And I'm telling you, it is very delicious and you will not regret making it. Well, that is sweets and eats for Thanksgiving. It was first carrot cake and now it's lasagna. I hope you enjoyed it. Have fun making it, because trust me, it's fun. It's a lot of work. And don't forget, you can put your lasagna together and then put it in the freezer or put it in the refrigerator and finish making it another day. All you have to do is just get it together, put the foil on, and you'll be ready to put it in the oven whenever you're ready to make it. So with that being said, I'm your hostess and Empress, Nikki T. Thank you for visiting my empire. Deuces.